This patient's condition is critical. We can't wait any longer. We must operate right now.
Zach pleaded.
You can't operate on her. Do you even know what procedure she needs, intern? We'll both get it in the neck if I let you take her in there.
She mocked him.
Blood clots are collecting inside the patient's head, compressing vital nerves. We can't wait any longer. Let go of the bed.
Zach said urgently. Rather than letting go, Nancy tightened her grip.
You, listen to me carefully. This is beyond your scope of practice or experience. Stop messing around. Dr. Williams will be back soon, and he'll take control of the situation. She'll be fine after he operates.
Zach glared at her.
The responsibility of a doctor is to save people's lives.
He expressed.
She's going to suffer from serious complications if the internal bleeding is allowed to continue.
He knew the operation couldn't be delayed any longer. A brain bleed would cause various nerves to be suppressed. There would be severe side effects, such as cognitive impairment and memory loss, even if the patient's life could be saved. As if she was aware of the debate going on above her head, Vanessa coughed lightly a few times. Zach noticed that blood was now starting to trickle from her ears, and his expression changed. He knew that he couldn't wait a moment longer. He had to operate immediately. He turned to Nancy and said firmly,
Let go of the bed right now. The patient can't wait any longer.
Nancy didn't loosen her grip at all. She grabbed onto the bed more tightly and replied,
I know you don't have a good relationship with Dr. Williams. Maybe you think you can do something dramatic and be the hero of the hour, but trust me, you'll get us both into trouble if you do this.
This isn't about heroics or trying to get one over on Dr. Williams. This is about saving a human life.
Zach hissed. He glared at her furiously before stretching out his left hand and striking her gently on the elbow. He expertly struck her funny bone, and Nancy involuntarily loosened her grip on the bed immediately. Before Nancy knew what was happening, Zach pushed the bed into the operating room, closed the door behind him with a loud bang, and then twisted the lock. Nancy was at a loss. She considered banging on the door, but thought better of it. She rubbed her elbow and turned to walk away. Inside the operating room, Zach immediately took out a pair of silver needles that he carried with him at all times. After sterilizing the needles, he took a calming breath. His hands were steady, and he held a needle in each hand between the thumb and forefinger. The needles hummed in his grip. As quick as a flash, the two needles were inserted into the skin on Vanessa's forehead with expert precision. The momentum of the needles didn't decrease at all when they were put in place. A moment later, a faint reddish color appeared on her pale cheeks, and her face gradually regained its warmth. But Zach didn't stop there. He moved quickly, turning Vanessa over and applying pressure on her acupoints in rapid succession. Her cheeks flushed with sudden heat. At that point, he held the index finger and middle finger of his right hand together and quickly applied pressure to his patient's head. Vanessa, who was still unconscious, suddenly let out a muffled groan. Dark red blood oozed from her ears and nostrils. At the sight of the blood, Zach let out a sigh of relief. That's good. The blood clots are draining away from the brain, he decided. He quickly wiped the blood from Vanessa's face. After that, he cleaned the wound on her forehead. When he had finished, he sat down to take a rest. He was panting heavily.
Wow, this body is weak, he thought. It was hard for me to even apply the first spike, which is only the first step of the full 9 spikes procedure. It seems I'm going to need to get in shape.
While Zach had been treating Vanessa, a young man in his 20s had been standing in the corridor outside the emergency room. The man was dressed in fancy designer clothes, and he was shouting arrogantly at a group of hospital staff. The same doctors and nurses who had constantly belittled Zach were now just standing there and allowing the young man to vent his anger on them.
What are you waiting for? You must save her. You have to operate immediately.
The young man shouted in frustration. A middle-aged doctor spoke up.
Mr. Hunter, it's not that we don't want to carry out the operation. The patient is seriously injured and we know she needs help fast, but brain surgery is highly complex and carries with it huge risks. This makes the situation more complicated. I'm afraid that the surgery wouldn't have a high chance of success if we were to operate now.
He explained awkwardly. He didn't want to upset Fabian Hunter, who was the heir to the Hunter Group in Ludington City.
What are you talking about?
Fabian glared at the doctor, wanting to rip him to shreds. Standing beside the doctor, one of the nurses added,
Mr. Hunter, please don't worry. Dr. Williams is a famous surgeon and he'll be arriving soon. He'll definitely save your friend.
Fabian snorted rudely, but he was taking his emotions out on the hospital staff. He wasn't just concerned for a friend, but was also suffering from an unpleasant mix of fear and guilt. As well as being beautiful and popular, Vanessa also came from an influential family. Her grandfather, Dr. Maxwell Stevens, was a famous physician. He was also the chancellor of Ludington Medical College and the president of the Association of Traditional Medicine in Ludington City. He was a prominent figure in the area's traditional medicine industry. The Hunter Group's main focus was selling herbal medicines and health supplements. Fabian knew that if he could utilize the Stevens influence, it would put the family business at an advantage. He had calculated that the best way to do this would be to win over Vanessa's heart, so he had continued to pursue her, even after she had rejected him multiple times. Having heard that Vanessa was going to Cloudy Mountain for a short vacation, he had driven there in hot pursuit and had insisted on taking her to watch the sunrise. Unable to resist showing off his driving skills on the dark mountain road, he had been driving too fast when the car hit a rock and spun out of control. Maxwell would hold him personally responsible if something bad happened to Vanessa. Fabian's heart clenched as he thought about it. It was rare for him to be so worried about anything. His self-pitying thoughts were interrupted by a loud call. Looking crossly in the direction of the disturbance, he saw a nurse running toward them, shouting for a doctor.
What's all the commotion about?
Fabian asked.
Why are you making so much noise?
The doctor walked over to Nancy immediately. He grabbed her arm and said in a low voice,
What's got into you? Whatever's happened, try and keep calm. Can't you see that young Mr. Hunter is here?
Turning to Fabian, he smiled apologetically before he looked back at Nancy.
Now what's wrong?
He demanded. Nancy glanced at Fabian, and then she looked back at the middle-aged doctor.
The patient has just gone into the operating room,
She replied unhappily.
She's having the operation. Did Dr. Williams get here already?
Fabian asked. Nancy hesitantly explained.
Actually, Zach's doing the operation. He said that the patient was in a critical condition, and he insisted that we couldn't delay any longer.
Zach? Is he a regular doctor here?
Fabian asked. The doctor was alarmed to hear Zach's name. He stammered.
Zach is a senior year student from the School of Traditional Medicine. He's an intern here.
Fabian's jaw dropped.